bring the poll question at Shander Show on Twitter. Where would you like to see the Eagles make a trade? That is off of what Mosher said an hour ago, John, on our show, which was think about wide receiver and defensive back more than running back. And I'll put a vote in right now and say, boom, right there, and we'll update the poll. 73% say running back, 13% wide receiver, 14% say cornerback, over 450 votes at Shander Show, John. So you hear it. Ajayi got hurt right after you got off the phone with us yesterday, and right away, McCoy, David Johnson, LeVeon Bell, and every other guy who's ever toted the football in the last 2 seasons seemingly is on the radar now. So is running back the most pressing thing that Howie Roseman has to do?
No, I don't think so. I think getting a deep threat, a speed threat on the offensive side of the football is still the most important part for this team, the most important part they're missing. That would, to me, be number one. I just look at the game as a whole, and we constantly look around this league, and there are some great backs, and you're going to see one of them on Thursday night, one of the great young backs, and Saquon Barkley, and this division is loaded with them. It's one of the few things they do have with Ezekiel Elliott, but it's just the position itself is not as important. I think if Corey Clement's able to come back and get healthy, not only can he do a competent job, he's very, very cost-effective. And this team, you know, I think everybody jumped the gun because of the Fletcher Cox restructure news, and they're assuming Howie Roseman is getting ready to make this big splash with Le'Veon Bell or LaShawn McCoy or David Johnson. Understand, this is about more than right now. This team has to pay Carson Wentz at some point, and they understand that. And there are certain guys who make a lot of money, Fletcher being one of them, that are candidates for restructures, and this team doesn't have a lot of cap space. Not only this year, but also moving forward. In fact, they were projected to be over the cap next year. So this is about more than right now. That's not to say Howie doesn't make moves. When they made the restructure on Friday, that was before Ajayi tore his ACL, so that changes everything. But I think a lot of it, and Thursday night will be an early test. I mean, if Corey Clement comes out there and plays well, I think the Eagles have a lot of confidence in them.
Yeah, John, it looks like from at least the fan perspective, and you know that's a tough barometer to use, but it's what we have, there's a difference between needing to fill the void of a body lost in Ajayi and fixing something that may not need to be fixed, meaning the running game. When I look at the running game, John, my only concern about the game is how come they're not running more as opposed to can they run the football? So I think that people are looking at it like, don't conflate the two and separate the two and say, yes, you need to replace Ajayi, but there isn't some big thing that needs to be fixed with this running game.
Yeah, I mean, look at Wendell Smallwood's numbers. I mean, it's obviously very limited, very small sample size, but their effectiveness on the runs is there. So I hear what you're saying. And you know, if you go to the third quarter of the Vikings game, the Eagles get the football. They go right down the field, and by and large, that entire drive was mainly running the football. And all of a sudden, Ajayi coughs it up at the 5-yard line, unforced error. Things go the other way, 68-yard pass to Thielen, and you find yourself down 20-3. I always talk about the personality of the game. Jim Schwartz talks about the personality of the game. Doug Peterson. Well, what are you going to do if you're down 20-3 midway through the third quarter? It's not it's not brain surgery. At that point, you got to start throwing the ball.
Yeah, and yesterday they asked about running the ball at the start. Now, I know your feeling about running the ball in this league. You got to throw. Doug brought up a point that, well, we called an RPO. So there was the option to run. They just chose not to, right?
Yeah, on the first play of the game, which was an ugly play, he said it was an RPO. It was kind of tough to tell because it was that ugly. And certainly if it was, Carson made the wrong decision because Xavier Rhodes was all over that route, had jumped it, and could have intercepted it, could have been a pick six right away. But, yeah, I mean, it technically, if it's an RPO, the quarterback has the option, but in reality, they're taught. I mean, you're reading one defender, and depending on what that defender does, you hand the ball off or you throw the football. Either way, it was ugly, and the Eagles have kind of gone away from the RPO game, and that doesn't surprise me. I think they ran 3 total in the game. It doesn't surprise me because that's something that Nick Foles felt really, really comfortable with, and they can do a lot more with Carson Wentz. So it's not going to be as heavy a staple in the offense now.
Talking with John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter, on the Boardwalk Honda hotline here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. You know, today Mike Groh was asked about what are they going to do, what's the plan without him. He said Smallwood's done a really nice job, Corey's progressing. How do you envision the backfield now with what's left if they don't make a move at running back?
Well, I envision it as a committee. I mean, all you have to do is look at since Doug has got here, they've always used the committee. And it, depending on who's available, I think Corey's now number one. I think Darren is the third down back. If he ever comes back, I don't think he's going to play again on Thursday. So he's gone since the season opener. Wendell fits into that role, and I think also I think Josh Adams will start to mix in a little bit more because he brings some of the physicalness that Jay Ajayi was able to provide. He's a very big back. He's a powerful back. So I think that's how it moves going forward, and I think Corey's the biggest key. I think, you know, if Corey can't play, if he can't handle, if he's not what we thought he was as a guy who came in here undrafted and turned into a Super Bowl hero, if he can't handle it, then you have to start talking about going outside the organization. And that's where all the trade talk comes in. But look, the trade deadline is October 30th. To me, the LaShawn McCoy rumors strike me as Fletcher just got extended. Howie's always liked LaShawn, and people are kind of throwing darts at the dartboard and hoping it comes true. He makes a lot of money. He's 30 years old. And, oh, by the way, he's got some off-the-field issues. So if the Eagles are thinking about bringing LaShawn McCoy back, they better have some intel from the NFL, because just because the police are not moving forward with that high-profile incident with his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend, doesn't mean the NFL can't suspend him.
Yeah, you look at that.
Nobody's talking about that.
No, and in fact, we were bringing that up earlier just as far as a deterrent to stay away from LaShawn McCoy. You had some issues, or at least concerns, surrounding LeVeon Bell and whether or not he would really be out there, or maybe the phantom injury to prevent anything happening the rest of the year. Let me ask you a question specifically about the head coach, and you can use the backdrop of Thursday night's game to answer this, John. But if you're Doug Peterson and you have the control to change one thing, from a game plan to a scheme to personnel, maybe a body in and a body out, just one thing that you think immediately will help improve this team's offense or maybe defense, what do you do?
I get. Now, is this a wish, or is this something they have on the team right now?
Yeah, something realistic. Like, hey, I trade everything from Le'Veon Bell. No, use the parameters of reality as much as we can in looking at what Doug Peterson can do realistically to turn this thing around as early as Thursday night.
I put Shelton Gibson on the field more and take Jordan Matthews off it, and I'd let him just run go routes.
I love it.
And I let him stretch the field. And I don't care if he catches one football. You have to respect it. And he made the play against the Vikings.
John, do you remember, John, real quick, do you remember a couple of years ago I would have the conversation about Bryce Treggs to do the same thing? Just stick him out there. I mean, there were guys all over the league, I kept saying, at the time, I think Tyreek Hill was like a rookie. The guy's 5'9", and he's running all over the field. I said, just put the kid Treggs out there and let him run.
Yeah, I mean, you have to prove yourself. Look, if you can't catch the football, that's the problem. Nelson Agholor can run.
Right.
He can't catch the deep ball. I talk about it a lot. He can't track the football. So it's not like you're going to ignore him if he's running down the field. But the opposition kind of knows that's not the threat that it should be or could be. And we talk. You don't have to look far. All you have to do is look to last season. Torrey Smith. You look at his numbers; they're awful. But his presence on the field provided more than anything else in the fact that opens things underneath for Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Nelson Agholor. It just makes things easier for the offense as a whole. They're missing it. That's what Mike Wallace was here for. And that's what Mac Hollins, if Mike Wallace got hurt. So they're down to number 3, but they still got a guy on this roster that can run. And he proved it last week against the Vikings. I know from behind the scenes, the Eagles don't have a lot of confidence in Shelton running routes and being a well-rounded receiver. But I don't think he needs to be that on this team right now. I think he needs to just go out and run and stretch the field.
The guy went up. Maybe I don't know how crisp. He's not Adam Thielen running routes. Of course, we can all agree on that. But he went up, and the difference, and you talk about he positioned himself to make a play on that ball, and that's what you're talking about. To let somebody who has some speed get down the field and then make it a one-on-one situation.
Yeah, and as I said, you have to respect it. Even if it doesn't work, you have to respect it. Last week it worked, and I'm not, Jordan Matthews was on the field for, I think, maybe 30 snaps. I forget the exact number. Look, I'm not saying he should be out there for 70 snaps, but he should be out there in those snaps because I don't think Jordan Matthews provides that. And you already have the guys who can work underneath in Alshon and Zach and Nelson and even Dallas Goedert. You have a bunch of people that can do that. And you have to make it easier for them by threatening the defense over the top. And I think Shelton can provide that certainly more than Jordan Matthews and certainly more than any other receiver on this team right now.
John, looking at this game, the last 2 weeks, I've been so confident, like a lot of people, and you look at the Titans, you look at last week as well, and you think, all right, there's just very little means that you can apply to the Vikings and the Titans before that they would go out and beat this Eagles team, even convincingly beat this Eagles team. So I'm confident again that the Eagles are a better football team than the Giants and that they're going to go in here and they have a lot of things working for them. But I would not be shocked at all if this Eagles team lost 3 straight, Thursday night being that third straight. How do they avoid? Well, let me ask you this. How realistic is it that the Giants are going to beat the Eagles Thursday night, in your opinion?
Well, it's realistic. I mean, you're talking to the guy who guaranteed these poor people the Eagles would be 4-2 after this game.
Witness.
So now hey, you got to be honest. There's some issues here. Yes. I don't think it's time to panic, but I do think it's time to panic if they lose to the Giants. Giants are a bad football team, but it is the NFL, and this isn't college. As you saw last week with the Vikings, Carson Wentz, 9 straight home wins. Eagles have been dominant at home since Doug got here, and they found a way to win that football game. That's what happens in the NFL. Then you add to it, this is the Super Bowl champion, so you're getting everybody's best shot. And then you add to it, it's the division game. Look, last year, the Giants were a terrible football team. Well, Jake Elliott, 61-yard field goal. And even up there, they were able to do some things, and they had the Eagles on the ropes. Division games tend to be closer a lot of times than they probably should be because each team knows each other so well. And what the Giants do have is 2 spectacular playmakers, and Odell Beckham Jr. and Saquon Barkley. And they can make something out of nothing. And even though
tackling,
and I'll say it again, and Mike knows, they got a bad quarterback, and nobody wants to admit it up there. So I do think the Eagles will find a way to win the game, but hey, Odell can make something out of nothing. Saquon can do it, and that's how the Giants can win this game.
Tackling, yep. And you talk about the quarterback. The one thing, that he does okay is he can throw the ball underneath. He's got playmakers and then make them wiggle out of tackle. The Eagles last year, I remember coming on, and one of the things I'd be so impressed with, John, is, man, they tackled last year. They tackled. You caught the ball in front of them, and they brought you down. The one game they didn't tackle, or two games they didn't tackle, that I can distinctly remember was Seattle and out against the Rams. They just had 2 games where they just didn't tackle. But the rest of the season, it seemed that they tackled you. Their tackling is awful right now, and a kid like Barkley and Beckham, that's a big worry for me.
Yeah, and you just saw what the Vikings did to the Eagles because they knew they were going to get whipped up front. They did get whipped up front. It was all quick throws, and they took their shots down the field where it was basically just boom, back foot hits the ground, ball's out, Thielen beats Jalen Mills. You got some of that same mentality. Eli Manning's not nearly as good throwing the football at this stage as Kirk Cousins, and he doesn't have two of those guys. But he does have OBJ, and he is going to get the football out quickly, and he does have a threat in the backfield that can break tackles and make you look silly. And I agree with you. And I asked Jim Schwartz that today about the quick throws and the yards after the catch. That was an issue against the Vikings, and it could be an issue against the Giants.
Mike brought up the tweet that you had earlier from Pro Football Focus just about the amount of pressure that the Eagles are getting on quarterbacks. And we talked a little bit about this with Jeff Mosher, John, before you. And I wonder your opinion on it because you got the numbers and you tweeted it out earlier. If the Eagles are just last year, they were on the right side of a split second, whereas this year they're on the wrong side of a split. The difference between a hurry and a sack. The difference between a route being run crisp and off a little bit that Carson Wentz is making the right throw. And that could be the difference. And this league is so crazy and up and down to why you can win a Super Bowl one year and look awful the next year.
Yeah, I mean, it is razor thin in this league. And I talk about it all the time with pressure. And sometimes all you have to do is look at the NFC Championship game. Sometimes it's better not to get a sack. And Chris Long gets the big pass rush, hits Case Keenum in the chest. You have the awful throw. Patrick Robinson intercepts it, takes it in for the end zone. There's an example of the hurry being better than the sack. If he sacks him, Vikings just punt the football. Who knows how that game goes from there. Literally stole the heart of their team because they got to hurry. So it can work both ways. But you're right about – I've talked about it a lot. Last season was a special year. And not only from the standpoint you're talking about, Eitan, but just from guys having career years. Patrick Robinson gone now is one of them. But look at a guy like Lane Johnson. Lane was an all-pro last year. Lane was unbelievable. And now you fast forward 2 weeks in a row, Eagles lost 2-game losing streak for the first time since 2016, strip sacks from guys going against Lane Johnson. That kind of thing didn't happen last season. And it's really, really tough to expect guys who had career years to back it up again with another career year.
There's so much very intriguing. You got the Super Bowl champions really struggling. A lot of questions. You got injuries. Last year, we brought this up at the beginning of the show, John. Last year, that next man up, it worked. You wonder if they blasted through their 9 lives last year because, it was really ridiculous. The fact that so many guys got hurt and you didn't really miss a beat. This year, guys are getting hurt, and I just don't know if you can keep going to that well. So far, McLeod being out, that seems to be a problem. We'll see what happens now with Ajayi out. Jeffrey was hurt. They couldn't really get through that situation. So the injuries are causing issues for this team. and it's proving right now to be a little bit too much for them to be able to compensate for, where last year they were able to compensate. But you can only do it so many times.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. People gloss over just how strange that was. And you're able to win the Super Bowl without Carson Wentz and Jordan Hicks and Jason Peters and Chris Maragos and Darren Sproles and replacing the kicker early in the season. Hey, typically that doesn't happen. And, people kind of got used to this mentality that the next guy was just going to step up and be great. And that usually doesn't happen in this league. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that the Eagles did all the heavy lifting before Carson got injured. And essentially were in a great position to take home field advantage. They were able to do that even though they looked really, really bad the last 3 games of the regular season. And then it became win 2 games at Lincoln Financial Field where they're dominant or had been dominant before last week, and you're in the Super Bowl, and you sort of roll the dice from there. It's not going to be that way this year. Obviously, at some point, I do think, hey, this division is awful, as we said. They went 0 for Week 5. You saw the Redskins last night. That's a first-place team in this division. The Eagles should be able to win this division, but then you talk about how are they going to catch the Saints, how are they going to catch the Rams. They're not. So that means, yeah, you might win this division, but at some point you're going to have to go through New Orleans. You're going to have to go through Los Angeles. The former is more daunting than the latter. Let's face it, the Rams are a great team, but that's not a huge home field advantage. The Saints, that's a huge home field advantage. It's just going to be much more difficult to win this year if the Eagles do make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's almost like you would love LeVeon Bell, you would love even a LaShawn McCoy outside of anything that may happen off the field, but Jay Ajayi, this is what we were talking about earlier before you came on. Jay Ajayi was a luxury last year. That offense was moving at least 10 points per game more of a clip than they are this year. So just adding, there's nobody you can add that will overcome the deeper issues that you referenced that will be the undoing of this football team, at least on offense.
Yeah, and remember the Jay Ajayi trade, because that was a surprise and people look at it. But that's a Howie Roseman trade. You're getting a guy on his rookie deal. Now people are talking about LeVeon Bell, who wants to, who already gets a huge salary when he does come in and wants more than that. If you want to re-sign him. And LaShawn, who makes a ton of money for a running back in this league. Those are not Howie Roseman type deals. He does like LaShawn McCoy as a player. There's no question about that. He always has. We're up to him. He never would have left. That part of it is true. But, I don't like mortgage. Not only do you have to pay these guys, you also have to send significant draft capital. That's not the way you stay good in this league, especially when the other shoe drops and the fact that you have to pay Carson Wentz at some point.
Yep.
And then we start talking about
it's what happened to the Seahawks.
And it becomes about roster building.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. John McMullen, all guests appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Good conversation. Plenty more on Eagles Giants the rest of the week. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, guys.